when we're selling democracy to the public, people feel like there's no democratic process about our foreign policy, and they're correct. Like, so when Trump talks about the deep state and he makes it about, oh, woe is me, but the real deep state is the stuff that covers up our human rights atrocities that we fund across the world as the #1 weapons exporter. Can we just put up even this third graph here? Just because this, if you scroll down, this just shows another, that one with the map. Sorry, I should have said map. You put this out there, just the sheer scope of where the United States has sold arms. You see every country basically there, except for some in Africa and Greenland, but that functions almost as like a military base already. We have a significant military.
We sold them to Denmark, so like technically,
right. Like what there's exactly, but that's there it is. Iran, China, Russia, and then that's basically it. That's it. And Yemen, is that what I'm seeing there? No, we've sold
Somalia.
Somalia, geez. I'm bad at maps. I shouldn't have even taken a guess. I'm not a great visual learner. Anyway, so I love having these because it does help me just think about it. Like Australia, you see all over the place. That's where we've sold arms just since the start of 2001. This is our effort to maintain primacy, even though as we're losing economic power to China, and Trump seems to be escalating that. Just your thoughts, Annelle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I remember speaking with someone on the National Security Council about the idea that the only place the U.S. is able to maintain, our status as #1 is weapons sales. And so we just have to double down on that, as opposed to saying, well, actually, no, as the global order becomes more multipolar, it is increasingly in America's interest to avoid unnecessary wars. Something like the war in Iraq that we foolishly, under false pretenses, engaged in was somewhat possible. The reason we did something like that was because as kind of the global hegemon after the Cold War, we were capable of doing that in a way that now we just can't really make these wars of choice are so much more costly, and arguably they were extremely costly at that time too, but in a way that Americans were still kind of able to ignore them, even though increasingly I do think that this is part of what Trump has tapped into, is the idea that Americans are tired of these endless unnecessary wars, which I hope seems to be informing the reason he's willing to engage in talks with Iran about a possible.
That's encouraging, because it's almost a blessing in disguise that the Biden administration didn't re-engage, because Trump would have scrapped it anyway, because he just cares about they could just copy paste the JCPOA into an email and print it out and have him sign it, and he would declare victory, and that would be amazing for all of us.
Totally. That's a very good point. Yeah, if Biden had actually just kind of snapped his fingers and re-entered, which he could have done the way he, re-entered the Paris Accords. But you're right that we would have been.
Well, he's a Zionist, so that's the problem, and that's where Obama's probably best achievement, in my estimation, was the Iran nuclear deal, because we now know, looking back, what he was facing with the Israel lobby. And we saw Netanyahu try to put public pressure on Obama at the time with that PowerPoint presentation with all that false information about how Iran was cheating on the deal, which wasn't happening. And Obama didn't cave. Biden didn't re-enter because he didn't agree with Obama.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But backing up, to your point about the lack of democracy in U.S. foreign policy, I mean, this is also a big part of what Quincy tries to do. We have a whole program called Democratizing Foreign Policy, which is partly just about tracing the influence of dark money in our, in Congress and in foreign policy decision making, especially foreign lobbies. But I do think that, for all that it has taken a genocide to get us here, which is appalling, I do think that people are waking up to some of this. And you think about, the ways that for so long the Israel lobby, in cahoots with sort of the defense lobby, were able to maintain this bipartisan, unconditional support for Israel and to maintain the censorship. Even someone like me studying, getting a PhD focused on the Middle East, I was warned away from studying Palestine because it was described as a career killer by a scholar who studied Palestine, who was able to do it and come through and have tenure on the other side, but it was like, it's just not worth it. And so the fact that they were able to maintain that for so long without kind of the coercion showing, and that now they have to show like what it is actually that maintains that censorship of support for Palestine. And it is police brutality. It is deporting people who express solidarity with Palestine. It is taking away funding, defunding universities that provide like Middle East studies program, people like Rosie Bashir at Harvard, who doesn't even study this stuff, but has like lost her tenured job. Like, again, I'm an academic, so I'm especially alarmed by the assaults on universities and academic freedom, but also just the assaults on freedom of speech writ large, or the millions of dollars poured into the primaries to oust Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush from Congress. And that Democrats didn't speak up for them is just appalling. But I do think that because they are losing the narrative, and because actually, at this point, the pro-Palestine side has the numbers, but they are intimidating people. The Trump administration is scaring people. People are especially non-citizens, are understandably unwilling to speak up as maybe they used to be. And so I do think it is up to American citizens to speak up about this. And again, it's not just about Palestine, it's about free speech writ large, because we know that it's just going to get worse. This is what authoritarian governments do all over the world. We know Trump is a bully. And if you stand up to a bully, he's less likely to come after you again. But if you show that, oh yeah, okay, I can be intimidated by this, it's just going to get worse. So I hope that people are not losing hope, because I do think that this is the time to stand up and speak out, again, whether it's about Palestine or just about the assault on our constitutional rights, including the rights of non-citizens. Like, freedom of speech isn't limited to citizens. It's just, Congress shall not make a law abridging the freedom of speech.
Right.
So I know it can be really disheartening for people, and it is frightening, and I recognize that, but I do think those of us who are citizens have an obligation to stand up, and to try to slow down this slide into autocracy.
Absolutely. Lastly, before I let you go, Annelle, just back to the Iran news and the fact that the Trump administration is re-engaging in these talks under Steve Witkoff. What's your impression of him? Because it's not as bad as I thought so far. Remember, he kind of strong-armed Israel to get that ceasefire done, the fake ceasefire that's just lasted for a short period of time, but it was more than what was achieved previously, at least for a short period of time. And the posture of we're America, you're the client state, versus Biden's weakness when it came to Netanyahu is something that's different. Witkoff went to the Middle East. I think it was during a Jewish holiday, or it was a time off, and he said, "You're going to meet with me no matter what, because we're the United States." Right. And now it seems like these Iran talks are not going terribly. What's your impression of what this guy's deal is?
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone had asked, do we just need more Steve Witkoffs? And my response was no. It's not him. He's, Trump is empowering him to speak for Trump and the US government on things like, we expect you, Netanyahu, to abide by the terms of the ceasefire, in order for Trump to have his inauguration, and we're not going to have dead babies coming through the headlines to the extent that they do.
Well, they're PR people. Trump's is a savant at one thing, and it's public relations.
Exactly. And so not only did he clearly not want that distracting from his moment of glory, but also to show that he could achieve what Biden hadn't, which was, Biden for months saying we're working tirelessly towards a ceasefire, never actually getting there. And then Trump being able to come in and, as you said, insisting, no, you're going to meet with us and you're going to stick to this. Unfortunately, I think just the political will evaporated. Trump wanted this mostly to show that he could get it when Biden couldn't, but he wasn't committed to actually maintaining that. And this, I think, speaks to, again, like the influence of very, very wealthy Zionist donors, people like Miriam Adelson and others that have given him hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. But on Iran, similarly, the fact that Trump is, again, tapping into this, to Americans' frustration with endless and unnecessary wars in the Middle East, so not wanting to do Netanyahu's bidding to get to fight Iran on Israel's behalf. And in general, like that meeting when Netanyahu and Trump, when Netanyahu just recently was back in Washington, and Netanyahu was hoping to get Trump to lift the tariffs on Israel, which he didn't do. He wanted Trump to speak out against Turkey, and instead Trump said, no, like Erdogan's my buddy, and you need to be reasonable.
Yep.
Unfortunately, on Gaza, Netanyahu continues to do and get whatever he wants with full U.S. support, including maintaining a full siege. Nothing has gotten into Gaza since March 2nd, and people are starving. And Israel is successfully implementing its policy of either killing all of the people in Gaza or forcing them to leave. And, there's that new branch of the Israeli government set up to facilitate people's departure. So I am heartened by the fact that Trump is not willing to bow to Netanyahu the way Biden was. But unfortunately on Gaza, he seems to be perfectly fine with the genocide.
Yeah, and I think he sees it as a real estate opportunity. I legitimately think that. And so he also doesn't respect, if people are poor, he can't empathize with them. Like, in a immiserated, he'll side with, he's drawn to people in power. It's why Netanyahu's not getting what he wants with the Erdogan thing, because Trump's inspired by Erdogan in the same way he's inspired by Bukele, by Orban in Hungary, by Putin in Russia. Like, he likes these kinds of people, and so I think he's disgusted by the Palestinians, probably because he perceives them as weak because of their victims.
Yeah. And, and I do think that I don't know what it will take to get him to see that differently, other than Americans making clear that they reject this, because I do think that Trump is sensitive to public sentiment. And so to the extent that people speak out against this, and I've been heartened to see prominent Christian commentators on social media posting, horrifying images of children in Gaza, just the way that people are still paying attention. My hope is that there are enough people on the right who maybe I don't agree with on any number of issues, but on killing children, we can agree. We don't want the U.S. sending billions of dollars, don't want our money, our taxpayer dollars, today's tax day, going to kill innocent children in Gaza.
Yep.
So, for me, and at Quincy, which is an organization where we try to work with the right and the left against unnecessary U.S. military interventions, trying to reach out to those on the right, which I do think writ large, I know it's hard. We're a very polarized country. I get it, not wanting to talk to your crazy aunt or whatever who's a Trumper.
Yeah.
But dead children, like if we can't agree.
We've shown this chart from Pew. We've shown this chart from Pew now 6 times or something in the last few weeks that Republicans from 2022 to 2025, ages 18 to 49, there's been a 15-point shift in negative views of Israel. But thank you, Matt, for that's not the right one. Close though. It's the one on negative views of Israel have risen. And then you see that it's now 71% of Democrats aged 18 to 49 have a negative view. And 69% of Democrats lean Democrats overall. But that shift for Republicans, it's basically stayed the same. If you're an older Republican and you're 50 years old, you love Israel. Mm-hmm. They like the ethno-state supremacist part and the killing of Muslims part. But that's significant. 15-point shift from 18 to 49. And Candace Owens is like one of the top political podcasts in the country. I am concerned about anti-Semitism. Like, I'm deeply, deeply concerned about that. And how do we appeal to the right on the basis of not wanting to kill children? I'm more comfortable going at it with the Dave Smith libertarian thing about our tax dollars than going to Candace Owens. Because, like, I genuinely think there's starting to be some real anti-Jewish hatred on the right, that not that there wasn't before, but in particularly like on this issue in particular on Israel.
Right. Well, and this goes back to some of what we were saying earlier of, when you have kind of the Zionists and the evangelicals on the same page, but also you think about Israel's outreach to the far right in Europe, for example, or people like Viktor Orban, these extreme anti-Semites coming out of the tradition of the Nazis and the other fascistic parties that murdered 6 million Jews.
The AfD in Germany. Right.
Exactly. And yet that Israel is willing to ally itself with them, or the Netanyahu government is willing. And it's useful for them as well, because they can say, well, you mean Israel likes us? How could we be anti-Semitic? So it is deeply concerning, but at the same time, when you have anti-Semitic being thrown around the same way, sort of anti-communist, the ways in which these terms start to lose their meaning, or even the notion of like a terrorist, the way, the Biden administration, or the Biden, probably they did too, but I'm thinking of the Trump administration referring to several of these people who were mistakenly deported as terrorists, or even Bukele saying that yesterday. These words start to lose their meaning, and something like anti-Semitism remains a huge problem. And to treat it seriously, and to be able to recognize it for what when it actually is, a hatred of Jewish people, as opposed to legitimate criticism of a government engaging in war crimes, atrocities, and genocide, and otherwise violating international law, as well as U.S. laws, and criticizing those policies. Those are two different things. Then when you conflate them, you're undermining the reality, the need to actually be serious about, we have to be careful of the ease with which the world and Europe and, European-derived societies have historically, it's been very easy to sort of go after the Jewish people and target them and blame them. And we've seen that for centuries.
Well, exactly. So it's concerning. I mean, all of it, we're in dark times, but as always, I appreciate you coming on, Annelle. You can check out her work at the Quincy Institute, including this particular brief, which is a great read. It's like 27, 28 pages. It's called Under Primacy, Weapon Sales Will Always Supersede Human Rights. And you can find it on the Quincy Institute website and on your social media. Annelle Sheline, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for all the work that you do tirelessly to into all this.
Well, thank you, Annelle. Always appreciate your work, and good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.